Okay, well, welcome everybody, and thank you, and for giving this opportunity. I'm not going to try to remember everybody's name because I will not remember. So I'll just those on Zoom, I can see your name. So if I guess if you're going to read, you can see my screen. Is everybody able to see my screen? Awesome. All right, so we can get started. This week's Torah portion is a double portion, one of the few Torah portions that are on very regularly together, and those are Vayakhel-Pekudei. In order to have the system of Torah readings in accordance with the seasons of the year. There are certain years, depending on if it's a leap year and when exactly the holidays come out. There are some years where we have certain Torah portions read together. Vayakhel-Pekudei, which are the final two Torah portions in the book of Shemos, in the book of not Numbers, Exodus, is the Vayakhel-Pekudei, and they're usually read together. And we'll get into that in a moment. But first, in my class, I like going over the picture and the association of the picture of the class and the title. I'm not exactly sure. The picture is associated with the content of the class, but not so much in I guess the title, Anchors in the Storm. So a peg holding I guess, for a tent. All right. That's all it is. That's the whole association. All right. I don't. Do you guys do the partial overview before, or you get straight into the class typically? Right into the class?
We usually start out with a joke.
A joke. Well, we'll get to the joke. We'll get to the joke. Um, I will say though, just the Torah portions of Vayakhel-Pekudei are a summary of the building of the Mishkan, all the different vessels and parts of the Mishkan that were built, the Tabernacle in the desert, as well as an account of the gold and silver and copper that were collected. So, in a sense, Vayakhel-Pekudei, these two Torah portions are a re-summary of all the vessels that were taught about in the prior portions of Teruma, Tetzaveh, and Kisisa. And it just summarizes that they were actually built and that Mishkan was put together, and that this was the amount of gold, silver, and copper that was collected. The other amounts of other items were not mentioned, but these were. So we'll leave it at that as the Parsha summary. So I see also that in the copy here, they don't have the introduction. So I will give a little introduction though. A girl was watching her mom making dinner, and prior to she was making a beef roast, and prior to making the beef roast, she cut off the edges before putting it into the pot. And the daughter asked her mom, says, "Mom, why do you cut off the ends of the roast?" And her mom says, "I don't know. That's what my mom did. That's what we do." She says, but why?" It's like, "I don't know." Well, let's go find out. So they go to grandma and ask grandma, why do we cut off the edges of the roast before we cook the roast? And grandma says, "I don't know. That's what we do. It's what my mom did." And so they go to the old age home to find old great grandma who's hard of hearing, and they say, Grandma. So why do we cut off the tips of the roast? She says, So, Grandma, why do we cut off the tips of the roast? And great grandma responds, says, "I don't know why you do it. I had a small pot." Um, the This is a classic issue in Judaism where it seems we're very, very caught up with details that don't really matter. Who really cares? Take, for example, Shabbos. Most people in the world, forget it, Jews, anybody that you tell that there's a day of the week that we're going to take off and we're just going to spend the time with family, we're going to eat, we're going to not work. Sounds beautiful. Great concept. But then you start talking about the details. And people are like, you're losing the beauty of this day of rest by getting so into the minutia. Can you walk this way, and can you turn on the light, not turn on the light, and what's all this craziness about? It seems to be very unnecessary and takes away from the beauty of the messages in the mitzvahs. That's what it would seem. If I can tell another story, um, this is not so much a joke, but it's not a true story, I don't think. But I heard this from Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz. Um, it's a beautiful story. He said there's the difference between non-Jewish religions and the Jewish religion. And he gives an example. There's a Christian man who's not a religious Christian, but his parents were Christian. And he gets into a car accident. And he's lying in the hospital on his deathbed. And he makes a deal with God. He says, God, if you make me religious, I'm sorry, if you make me well and I get out of this situation, I will become religious. And lo and behold, he gets better. And true to his words, he's an honest man. He goes to the first church he finds. He has no denomination he belongs to. And he walks into a church and tells the priest, Father, I had the situation, I had a miracle, and I've committed to become religious. And of course, the priest embraces him and says, Beautiful, accept JC in your life, come to church on Sunday, be a good person. And he says, That's it. That's all you need to do. You are a religious man. Great. And for the rest of his life, this man remembers that he had a miracle, God saved him, and he's religious now, and he believes in God. Then we have the same story happens with a Jew. Jew grew up, doesn't know anything about Judaism, but he knows he's a Jew, and he gets into a car accident. And he's in the hospital, lying in his deathbed. And he says, God, if you save me, if you're there and you save me from this situation, I will become religious. And lo and behold, he gets better. And true to his word, as soon as he gets out of the hospital, he finds the closest synagogue he can find. And he comes in and says, Rabbi, I want to be religious. God saved me from a car accident. I didn't think I was going to make it. I want to be religious. And the rabbi looks at him funny. Says, You're sure? This is not. He says, No, Rabbi, I made a deal with God and I'm going to keep to my word. So the rabbi said, Well, you asked for it. All right, we have to pray. So he says, Okay, what do I say? He says, No. You can't just pray. You first have to wash your hands. So man dutifully goes to the sink and washes his hands. He says, No. You have to take a cup and then you have to fill it with water and you have to pour it on your hands. No, not that way. You have to pour this way first and that way first. And then he says, okay, well, finally he finishes washing his hands. Then he tells him we have to pray. He tells him, okay, you're going to put on these black straps and you're going to stand up, you're going to sit down, you're going to walk forward, you're going to backward. By the time you finish the morning prayers, he forgot his story in the hospital entirely. And he's totally lost now into this minutia. This is the story of religion, of Jewish religion. If you start getting involved in practice, it gets very, very tedious and seemingly inappropriate. If we want to be connected to the mitzvah, we want to be connected to the holiness and to the message of Torah, shouldn't we stop being so busy with the details and just keep Shabbos, meaning day of rest. Keep kosher, don't eat pork. What do I have to start going all the craziness? What's the need for all those details? So hopefully in today's Torah portion, in today's class, we will learn why it's important, and not only why it's important in practice, but why it's important for continuity, where our children won't remember the message, the beautiful message, but they'll remember that what we did, and they remember the details. It's like I have to one more story if I can. There was a new rabbi came to a town, and they start praying, and it comes to the Shema, and half of the people in the shul get up, and the half remain sitting, and a fight breaks out. Everybody's screaming at each other. Those standing screaming at those sitting, you have to stand up, and those sitting screaming at those standing, no, you have to sit down. And this is going back and forth. And the rabbi's like, what is going on? So he calls the Gabbai. He says, Gabbai, what's this? It's like, we don't know the custom of our synagogue. And he says, what do you mean? He says, there has to be a custom. Does nobody remember what the custom of the synagogue is? Do we stand or we sit? And finally, they do the same story like with the great grandmother. They find the oldest man in town and they ask him, they said, the rabbi asks him, it's like, what's the custom of the shul by the Shema? He says, I don't remember. He says, okay, let me ask you differently. Is the custom in the synagogue by Shema to stand? He says, no, I don't remember that being the custom. He says, okay, well, was the custom to sit? He says, that doesn't sound like the custom either. And the rabbi flusters, it can't be that everybody's going to stand screaming at each other. So, that was our custom, right? Our custom was to scream and to fight. That's what we remember. We remember the details. We remember the minutia that the do this way and not this way. Not so much the message. The message we can learn ourselves, but as children, what we connect to are the details. And we'll learn this message from this week's Torah portion. So now, without further ado, we will begin. So in this week's Torah portion, the first Torah portion, Vayakhel, the Torah again, as I said, tells us that Moshe gathered the wise-hearted men and women from the camps to build and craft all the different parts needed for the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the vessels, the gold, the silver. So everybody donated the materials, and then the Torah tells us exactly what happened. Now, do you all read, or does nobody read? How does this work?
We usually read.
Read? Okay.
And then the rabbi reads
I'm sorry?
the details. Usually we all read, and then the rabbi usually reads.
Oh, so everybody gets one reading chance, and then the rabbi reads the rest.
Yeah, one or two, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
One is fine.
whatever works.
But you're teaching, we can do it your way.
No, my way is everybody reads. I don't read typically. I'm not. English is not my first language. So, if you will, I don't know your name, but if you can read, please first. Tova.
But you're not going to remember.
I most probably will not. If you can read text number 1, I'll bring it up on the screen here. And this is just a recount in the Torah of what exactly happened.
And every wise-hearted person among you shall come and make everything that God has commanded. The Mishkan, its tent and its cover, its clasps and its planks, its bars, its pillars and its sockets. The ark and its poles, the ark cover and the screening dividing curtain, the table and its poles and all its implements, and the showbread, and the menorah for lighting and its implements and its lamps, and the oil for lighting, and the altar for incense and its poles, and the anointing oil and the incense and the screen of the entrance for the entrance of the tabernacle, the altar for the burnt offering, its copper grating, its poles and all its implements, the washstand and its base, the curtains of the courtyard, its pillars and its sockets, and the screen of the gate of the courtyard, the pegs of the tabernacle and the pegs of the courtyard, and their ropes, the meshwork gardens to serve in the holy gardens for Aaron the Kohen, and the garments of his sons in which to serve as Kohanim.
Thank you. So as we see, this is a very detailed list, even though as opposed to the Torah just telling us they did everything that God commanded, the Torah gets into all the details, which is an interesting topic on its own, but we won't look at it. It sort of ties into our topic today about details, but we're going to focus on something in a moment. But beforehand, there should be a big question we have here. The Jewish people, and specifically these craftsmen, led by a man named Bezalel, who I'm actually named after, specifically Bezalel from the Mishkan. That's my mom wanted me to be an artist. Didn't work out very well for her, but
I was going to say,
that
she
was
missed on that one.
yeah, she definitely missed on that one. But yeah, but the question really becomes, and for the record, Bezalel at the time of building the Mishkan was either 13 or 15. It was a very, very young man. But even the older people of the camp, who knew how to do any of these crafts? The Jewish people we learned about were slaves in Egypt, and their job was making bricks out of what mortar that they used, and building these silly buildings, as the Torah tells us, that they were unnecessary storehouses, etc. So where did they get all the skills that they needed? Seems to be a big problem, And again, it's, some of the skills may be pretty simple, but some of the skills were very intricate. The menorah, for example, even though the menorah was made by God, but other parts of the Mishkan there was a lot of gold and silver that was crafted, wood, weaving. Where did they have all these great skills? I mean, maybe they had some, rudimentary knowledge about it, household knowledge, but to be craftsmen, none of them were craftsmen. So we'll turn to the Ramban, Nachmanides, who actually tells us a very interesting thing, that it seems to be that there was a miracle. God bestowed upon certain individuals skills that they did not have naturally. But let's see it in the words of Nachmanides. Meira, if you can read text 2, please. And I'll pull it up on the screen, sorry. Go ahead.
Israel in Egypt was crushed by labor with mortar and bricks. They had not learned the craft of silver and gold or the cutting of precious stones, nor had they ever seen them. It's thus quite remarkable that there would be among them a person of great wisdom in silver, gold, stone cutting, and woodworking, as well as designing, embroidering, and weaving. Even among those who learn from master craftspeople, one cannot find an expert in all these traits. Those who are knowledgeable and accustomed to them, but whose hands are constantly in clay and mud, would be unable to produce fine and beautiful artistry. Therefore God told Moses to see this wonder and know that he had filled Bezalel with a divine spirit to know all these in order to build the tabernacle.
Thank you. So it was a miracle that they knew these things. So we can appreciate that God needed to sort of bestow upon certain individuals these great skills. But if we look back for a second to text 1 and verse 18, there seems to be a thing there that did not require great knowledge, and that was the pegs of the tabernacle and the pegs of the courtyard and their ropes. Um, Most people, a peg, as we saw in the picture, is a simple tool. It's not a complicated. It's either a wooden or metal nail. In essence, that's all it is. It's not a complicated piece of work, and it's very practical. So it's not something you have to. It's not artistic. It is a practical tool, and so you would assume that those items did not require any wise-hearted artisans to be able to produce. That should have been able to be done by just regular, laborers. So why does the Torah mention those? And that's going to be the focus for the next few paragraphs here. This idea of the pegs. What was so special about the pegs? Why did they have to be mentioned? And why was it necessary to have wise-hearted experts to do this simple job? Okay. So our question is first to understand to answer our question. We of course have to understand what were the pegs used for. And so, if you're not familiar with the building of the Mishkan and its different parts, we will mention that and discuss it right now. Um, so we turn to Rashi, who actually tells us when the Torah commands about the pegs, because it does say it in the Torah that you have to make the pegs. Not only here when it says that they were made, it was also part of the commandment. Rashi tells us right away what those pegs were. And Dasi, if you can read, please, text number 3 for us.
Hey, they were like copper stakes made for the curtains of the tent and for the curtains of the courtyard. They were tied with ropes all around their lower edges so that the wind would not lift them. They were driven into the ground so that they would not move in the wind.
Thank you. So Rashi tells us that the pegs were not ornamental, they were practical. The Mishkan, if you're not familiar with it, I'll just give a brief overview. The Mishkan was made up of wooden planks or wooden beams stood up in a rectangular shape with one opening on the side, and the Mishkan was covered with animal skins. 3 layers or 2 layers, 2.5 layers, different opinions exactly, but there were definitely 2 full layers of animal skins covering the Mishkan. By the way, just if you're ever worried about fantastical beasts in Torah, there was one of the animals or skins that was mentioned there is called a tachash. And the tachash, according to one description in the rabbi said it was a one-horned animal. And that this animal only existed then for the building of the Mishkan. So there you have unicorns in the Torah. So just a nice side note, right? Well, these curtains, these skins, they were a form of fabric, and they would blow in the wind. So they would be tied down with pegs. So they had ropes or the actual edges of the skins had these pegs connected to them, and they were tied down. So they were tight around the Mishkan. They wouldn't flap in the wind and wouldn't get lost that way. So again, the pegs were a practical part of the building of the Mishkan. They were not ornamental. So now it makes sense that the pegs were an important part of the Mishkan. It doesn't answer our other question yet, but it does point out that the pegs were a part of the building. It wasn't just ornamental and not even totally practical, meaning it was practical, but it wasn't just practical as in God told us to do something, and then in order to be able to do it properly, we came up with some practical solutions. Like, for example, the Torah tells us to use a shofar, right? It doesn't tell us how we have to make the shofar. So we practically figure out how we need to do that on our own. The pegs are different than that. And as we'll see from the Rabbi, he says it explicitly, the pegs were not just a practical, but they were part of the commanded. Part of the mitzvah of building the Mishkan was to make these pegs. And Ramon, would you like to read for us a text number, please, 4?
To resolve this, Rashi explained that the pegs were an inseparable part of the curtains themselves. Without them, they were moving in the wind. It makes sense then that since the wise-hearted had to make the curtains, they did not content themselves with making only the main parts of the curtains. Rather, they finished them in a way they would be a complete entity in all their details. This means they made not only the body of the curtains, but also all their clasps, and even the pegs and ropes that were needed to fasten them so they would not move in the wind.
Thank you. So it was really the wise-hearted people who were in charge of the weaving of the skins and the curtains. They were the ones who said, part of this project is to make the pegs. We need those pegs in order to be able to fulfill the commandment properly. They wouldn't just say, oh, this is something simple. We're going to let somebody else do this. No, they wanted to do it. It was part of the building of the Mishkan. And this is the key here. Back to our conversation and discussion at the beginning of the class. The pegs were not just a practical thing and therefore not as important. They were details, seemingly insignificant details, but they were part of the whole. So much so that the wise-hearted people felt the need to participate in creating those items, not just making sure that they were there, but actually being involved in them because it was part of the mitzvah. The details matter. And it's not about the skill level. There wasn't there was nothing special about the pegs. It was simply that the pegs were part of the mitzvah. And again, this goes back to the details, but we'll get more to that in a moment. So let's get to the beauty of the last detail. So in a way, this ties into another concept in Judaism, which is he who completes a task is given the credit. Many of us, I'm sure, start many things in our life and don't necessarily finish. We hope our kids will, but it's hard to get everything done. I actually heard a great line once: is that the sooner you recognize that you're not going to be able to accomplish everything in your life, the sooner you'll be able to start accomplishing something. Right? Most people wait. I'm going to do all these great, amazing things when I get whatever these things I need, and end up dying without ever accomplishing anything, as opposed to recognizing that it's impossible for one human being to live out all their dreams. It's just not physically possible. We don't live long enough yet. But there's something about finishing a project, something special about finishing a project, seeing a project through completion and recognizing that all aspects of the project are important. We see this in another event in the Torah, and that is the taking of and burying the bodies of the Shvatim. The Torah doesn't tell us explicitly about all of them. It does tell us explicitly about Yosef, that Yosef's body was brought from Egypt along with them in the desert, and it was then buried when the Jews entered into the land of Israel in the city of Shechem. Incidentally, one of the three places in Israel that are the most contested, right? The three most contested places in Israel are the only three places that is mentioned in the Torah that we purchased, right? Think about it. What are the three most contested places in the land of Israel? We're talking about it now.
In the West Bank.
No, not the West Bank. Shechem is one of them.
Yerushalayim.
Temple Mount, specifically the Temple Mount, not Yerushalayim, the city. The Temple Mount and the first one. Come on, nobody?
The cave of Machpelah.
Very good, thank you.
Hebron.
Yes, the Marasa Machpelah, Hebron.
That's what I was trying.
Oh, that you're saying West Bank. Okay. Yeah, the three most contested places in Israel are the three places that the Torah tells us that they were purchased. Of course, Avram purchased Hebron, the Marasa Machpelah. Yaakov purchased Shechem when he arrived back in Israel from Haran, after he brought his family. And the Temple Mount in the Tanakh in Shmuel, it tells us that King David came to, his name was Arnava HaYevusi. I don't know how you say Yevusi in English. Yevusite. He owned the land of the Temple Mount, and he offered King David the land for free. He said, "You're the king, and I want to give it to you." He said, "No, I will pay for this only." And just like with Ephron, with Hebron. So, yeah. So back to our story. Joseph's bones were carried by Moshe first. It's an interesting story there, how he brought them up, right? The coffin of Joseph was placed in the Nile. The reason why it was placed in the Nile in a metal casket, in order that the Egyptians should not serve him as a god, because the kings were served as gods, so they placed it in the Nile. Now the tradition was passed down. When we leave Egypt, we have to take Joseph with us, and he's in a metal casket in the Nile. Well, Moshe, when everybody was preparing to leave, he went to the Nile. He didn't know where to look, so there's two versions. One version is he wrote on a piece of paper, "Alei Shur, rise up, ox." Joseph is going to compare to an ox in the blessings of Jacob. So he wrote on a piece of paper and he threw it into the river, and then the casket rose. And incidentally, that piece of paper was found by a man named Micha. And when the sin of the golden calf, when they threw the gold into fire, he threw that piece of paper into the fire, and then the calf came out. Just some interesting connections there. But another simpler version is Moshe arrived at the Nile and said, "Joseph, you made us promise that we'll take you with us when we leave. We are leaving. I don't know where you are. Either show yourself, or I'm absolved of our promise." And the casket rose up, and they brought it. So, and Moshe personally, according to all versions, Moshe personally was the one who made sure that Joseph's bones and casket came with, I say Joseph's bones because that's what's referred to a lot in Torah, Atzmos Yosef. But he brought them along. So he was personally involved. Yet, we see something very interesting here. If you can read David, text number 5, please.
And the bones of Joseph, which the children of Israel had brought up from Egypt, they buried in Shechem, in the portion of the field that Jacob had bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for 100 kesitas, and it became an inheritance for the children of Joseph.
Thank you. Well, of course, there's a glaring error here. And the bones of Joseph, with the children of Israel, had brought up from Egypt? No, that Moshe brought from Egypt. The Jews may have brought it into the land of Israel and buried him there, but Moshe was the one for 40 years who was personally responsible for these bones. So why does the Torah tell us that it was the children of Israel? So we turn to the Medrash, and if anybody on Zoom would like to read, if you raise your hand, or if not, I can read, or so we can go back to the beginning. All right, well, I guess I'll read. Okay, in text number 6, we see the words of the Medrash. If you start a mitzvah, be sure to complete it. Moses was attending to the bones of Joseph. He took them with him when he departed Egypt. Moses passed away in the desert and did not enter the land. The Jewish people brought in the bones of Joseph and buried them, and the mitzvah was attributed to them. So, of course, Moshe was credited for what he did, and it was considered a big mitzvah for him. However, the attribution, the what we call the mitzvah, who took Moshe's bones from Egypt and brought them to the land of Israel, we refer to those who actually completed the task. So let's go back now to our wise-hearted artisans in the desert and the pegs that they created. When God is telling the Jewish people to build the Mishkan, parts of the Mishkan were very, very intricate, especially the curtains. There was two very complex components. One is that the weaving was done of the wool while they were still attached to the animal. So while the wool was still attached to the, I guess, sheep or goats, they were able to weave it. It was a very special kind of weaving. And secondly, the way they wove them, it was with either patterns that shone equally on both sides, or sometimes different patterns on different sides. So you would see different pictures depending on which side of the curtain you looked at, even though it was all woven. It was the different types of weaving. These were very intricate, again, skills. And God is telling the Jewish people, you're now building a beautiful, detailed, intricate place for me, the Tabernacle, the Mishkan. Don't forget about the details. Be involved in the details, just as important as it is to recognize the beauty of the most intricate parts of the Mishkan. Also remember the more sort of lesser of craftsmanship, but they're of no less import. The details are very, very important. And it's not about being organized. In a Michelin restaurant or a Michelin star restaurant, so every detail is measured. And that's more, that's more for, a, it proves sort of a point, if you will. But in a way, it's about your heart being into it. When you care about the details, is a proof that you really care. Right? If you do something half-heartedly, you don't really pay attention to the details. It's not as important. I want to make dinner for my family after a day's work. I'm not going to care if there's, the perfect garnish and if it sits on the plate in the best, and the palette of the pairing of the apple juice with with the spices. It's not as important. They need to eat. But if people that are into food, that like cooking, will make that extra effort even in a Tuesday evening dinner because it matters to them. It's important. It's a way of showing I care. I care about the details. And again, it's not just about knowing the laws. It's not. It's also, as we said before, very, very important in connection for continuity. But we actually find this idea of being wholehearted from Avram Avinu, but in the words of the previous Rebbe. And I will pull it up on the screen and then read in text number 7. I can read it in Yiddish first if you want. And then, it says about Abraham, because Akev, the word Akev is because Avram heeded my voice. That's the verse that the previous Rebbe quotes, and he tells the following story. In Lubavitch, there's a story told by one of the older Hasidim, whose name was David Sirkis, who heard it from his father, his father was one of the prominent students of the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe. And he told the following story. When the Tzemach Tzedek was a young child, the Tzemach Tzedek was the third Chabad Rebbe, the grandson of the Alter Rebbe, he learned Chumash from his teacher. Later, when he was tested by his grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, he came across the verse, because Akev Avram heeded, right? So again, Akev is translated because. His grandfather asked him to explain, and the child interpreted the word Akev literally. And the word Akev literally means heel, right? In Hebrew, an Akev means a heel. And he explained, continued the Tzemach Tzedek, the patriarch Abraham heard the command of God all the way down to his heel. Meaning Abraham was permeated fully by the command of God. It wasn't just his head or heart that recognized God's command, but even his heels felt it. When the Alter Rebbe heard this, he was very pleased and said, this is the meaning of the verse, and it will be, if Akev, you will listen to me. Right? Akev, again here, if Akev. The heel must also hear the mitzvah, and we must act on it. And if it's not a mitzvah, it's simply not done. Meaning every part of our life, even down to the simple details, should be governed by Torah. Now, people don't realize this necessarily. I like to point this out, especially for my friends who don't know much about Judaism. Either they're non-Jewish or they have not heard a lot about Judaism. Judaism has something to say about everything we do. Not almost everything, everything. Every aspect of our life, from getting dressed in the morning to going to sleep at night, Torah tells us something about how it's done. And there's a right way and a wrong way. There are details. Whether you tie your shoe, when you tie your shoes, you're supposed to put on your right shoe first, but then tie your left shoe first in reference to there's details about everything. And it's not necessarily known because it's not a big deal, but it is a big deal. And it's not a big deal because, there's a story of the Rebbe once, an individual came to the Rebbe whose wife was becoming very religious. He wasn't interested, but his wife schlepped him along and they went to see the Rebbe. And they went in for Yechidus. It was a private audience. And the way it worked is when you went into private audience, you would write what's called a zettel, a note to the Rebbe. And you would walk in, you would hand the Rebbe the note. The Rebbe would read the note and then respond to you directly. So he was asked, to write a note, and he said, "I have nothing to say. I'm here for my wife." But they said, "No, you have to, go into the Rebbe, write something." So he wrote the following question. He says, "Does God really care? Does God really need all these little details?"
Yes.
Is that important for him? And that's what he handed into the Rebbe. So the Rebbe, when he saw the letter, he looked at him and said, I don't understand your question. So he says, so he thought he wrote it in English, and he thought maybe the Rebbe didn't understand his English, so he started saying in Yiddish. He didn't speak Yiddish. He came from a Jewish family. Then everybody spoke Yiddish, religious or not. And the Rebbe says, no, 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 I understood the language of your question. I don't understand your question. It's not for him. It's for us. Of course, God doesn't care, right, if we eat milk and meat together or not. It's not. It doesn't change anything in God, right? God is not like, oh my God, oh you ate milk. No, it's for us. By us being involved in those details and not just doing it in general. And as we said earlier, just touching on the message of the mitzvah, the beauty. No, there's a dietary law that's so important. No, no, no. The details matter because that's how we get involved. That's what touches us, and it affects every aspect of our life. When the mitzvah is only spiritual, meaning there's only the messaging related to the mitzvah, then it's only a heart or head thing. It doesn't affect our body. When the details are important, that's when it affects our body as well, and affects everything. Now, we're not Avram Avinu, of course, but he does give us a message here of how we're supposed to approach doing a mitzvah. And again, this goes back and it connects also to education. We have to tell our kids about the details. We have to show them how to do things in the specific way. I'll actually tell a story from Rabbi Nu, who always tells the story, which I liked very much. Um, he said that he had friends of his friends, members of the community, who were traditional, and they had children, and the children grew up, and the children were not participating in Judaism at all. And they came to the rabbi and said, Rabbi Nu, we don't understand. We know we always made sure to build a sukkah for them and to have a seder for them and to have a Shabbat dinner for them. But they're not doing any of it. And the rabbi had a great response. He said, yeah, because you were doing it for them, not for you. They saw you didn't care about it. It wasn't important. It wasn't important to you. It was important for you. So they didn't care. They saw your heart wasn't in it. When you want to convey something to your children, you do it in that way, meaning wholeheartedly, and also paying attention to the details, showing them that the details matter. And this is why one of the things we celebrate in Judaism is we celebrate the details. We celebrate halacha. It doesn't have to be negative. It doesn't have to be, oh, you're doing it wrong. It doesn't have to be with a negative connotation. But there should be an emphasis on that it's important. And in the words of the Rebbe himself about education, and specifically educating in this manner about how important all the details are, the Rebbe says the following: from the moment the child enters the world, the parents strive to surround him or her with an atmosphere of Judaism, Torah, and mitzvot. This is the essence of education. As is well known, the custom in Israel for generations has been to hang chapter 121 of Psalms, Shir HaMalot, a song of ascents, in the child's room immediately after birth. This is something we still do today. Many people still do this today. Similarly, Jewish mothers have always sung lullabies to their children with the words, for its merchandise is better than all merchandise. In Yiddish, it's the Torah is the best schoira. It's the best, the Torah is the best merchandise. This is done even before the child can distinguish between good and evil, before they start speaking, immediately after birth. We don't wait for the child to grow up to be able to have a conversation, a philosophical conversation about how important Judaism is. We go straight to it from the beginning, and we train them, and we teach them, and we show by example how the details matter. And when we have, and again, as we mentioned before, when we pay attention to the details, it shows how much we care. We're not just having Shabbat. We're going to not go to work and we're going to hang out. No, Shabbat is we have to do all these things. We're going to make Kiddush in a specific way. We're going to light candles and we're going to go to shul. And then when we do the mitzvah on a holiday, on the Seder, we're coming up now. We have all these different customs in the Seder. We're going to eat the matzah this way. We're going to have this part and we're going to tell this story. We get very specific about it because that's how we show them that we care. That's how we show them that's important to us because the details matter. And when we have this sense of connection to the Torah, that's what makes it continue, and that's what it gets etched into our children to remember how important it is to us. And the ultimate lesson is again back to our wise-hearted the Rebbe explains this as the wise-hearted artisans, and this also applies to what the Rebbe calls the wise-hearted educators of every generation. For a teacher to be able to teach and a parent to be able to educate their children, how important it is to do this. And in the words of the Rebbe, this is a lesson for the wise-hearted in every generation, especially those involved in education, those bearing responsibility to raise their and many students. The duty of a wise person does not end simply by teaching the student the things within their ability to impart through their wisdom. A truly wise heart means making sure the fruits of the student's education are complete in every detail. Even when it comes to things that seem secondary or external, like stakes and strings, which might not seem necessary for a wise heart, the teacher must ensure that the student has retained them to the fullest measure. Only when the teacher has perfected the student in even the most external aspects can they be certain that the student is strong and secure, ready to stand firm even when challenges arise. This is the sign that the teacher's lessons have truly penetrated the student's inner being, so that not even a single detail remains untouched by them. This is what we need to do. Um, the details matter. I keep repeating the same thing, but it's so important. And it's so hard sometimes because really stop being crazy. And you're sitting by the Shabbat and there's you're doing it wrong. By the Seder, I'm sure this happens. You're doing it wrong. You have to do it this way. That's not the way we do it. Like the story we told about the people standing or sitting by the Shema. But yet that is what keeps us alive. That focus on the details. It reminds us how important that is. And in the words of another rabbi who passed away in the Holocaust, Rabbi Ezriel Zelig Noach Kushalevsky, he explained the following verse from Isaiah. It says in Isaiah, "Enlarge the place of your tent, and let the curtains of your dwellings be stretched wide." This refers to when those not fully integrated into the community increase. They are to be considered as children. And when new people join, whether it's people who have not been religious or people who are converting. Hence, the verse says, "Enlarge the place of your tent and dwelling." This refers to synagogues and study halls, where synagogues are called tents, for prayer, and study halls are referred to as dwellings. The message here is that we must expand these spaces so that even those considered children of the estranged can come to learn. Lengthen your ropes and strengthen your stakes. This metaphor emphasizes strengthening the stakes, ensuring that those not entirely within the fold do not falter to the right or left. I just remembered something I was thinking about before. It ties into this idea of the details. When children ask questions, many times they ask questions that are beyond their capacity. Right? I remember my 4-year-old. Well, he's not my 4-year-old anymore. He's 20 now. But he asked me when he was 4. We were walking down right here on High Point Road, Shy. He said, "How does a car work?"
Oh,
Now, I don't know fully how a car works, but I told him everything that I knew in words that, to my best ability, he understood. And I knew he mostly did not understand what I had to say. He did not. I was talking about pistons and spark plugs and the canisters that put pressure, it's exploding. But I went through it with him. Not because it was important for me to teach him how a car runs. I'm not into cars. I don't know how cars run perfectly. But I did recognize that he'll recognize my sincerity, meaning I'm telling him the truth. I'm not heeing and hawing. I'm telling him straight, and I'm getting to all the details that I know. And I think this relates to the same idea. When we're teaching, when we're passing on a message, it's so important to cover everything. Don't give the general. Shabbat is so beautiful. No, tell Shabbat how Shabbat is. And it doesn't mean that you have to commit to do everything right away. It doesn't mean that you have to take upon yourself every single stringency and do what you are where you're holding, but know what the details are. Know where you should be going and know where you have room to improve. And when you're feeling inspired, as opposed to taking on some spiritual a commitment in the sense of something lofty and that you relate to, try to take on an additional detail in what you already do to make it a little bit more perfect, a little bit more involved, make it more yours because you care about the details. So what does it mean to be wise-hearted ultimately? It's not about being smart. It's about having a heart in the thing that you're doing. And as King Solomon writes in Mishlei, in Proverbs, the wise-hearted takes commandments, but one who talks foolishly will weary. And as the Ebenezer says, wise-hearted, for the wisdom is in their heart. Meaning, when wisdom penetrates our heart, that's when it really matters. When we know something, but we don't care about it, then it hasn't penetrated our heart. When we really, really think about it and it penetrates our heart, then we become wise-hearted, meaning then our wisdom actually affects how we behave. And the simplest example I always bring about myself is like if I would realize, that eating healthy is actually that important for me, I would go on a diet. But because it's just an idea, it didn't permeate my heart. I'm not going to do anything about it, or not enough. And the more, God forbid, somebody who needs it, and they, God forbid, deal with the situation, then suddenly it permeated their heart. Suddenly it became real. And so, our ultimate message here, and our question that we started with is, why are all the details so important? Why do they matter? They matter because that's how we show how we're involved. That's how we connect, how we ultimately commit to God and teach our children how to be committed by focusing on the details and being involved in the details and learning more of those details and not seeing them as just something simple. But as the Torah portion teaches us, the wise-hearted men and women who built the Mishkan did not only do the complicated things, but they got down to the nitty-gritty because they cared about all of it. And as I said earlier, or a moment ago, for ourselves, there's always more for us to increase. There's so many details that we can add and layer on what we're doing. And it just shows and talks to our own commitment. And it helps us commit more because I care if I'm doing it the right way or the wrong way. I care that is this in the right direction? Am I holding the shofar correctly? Am I getting the best kind of lulav or etrog? These are all important. They're not important just because God is so worried about which level it is, but because that's how we connect to it. That's how we make it part of us. And the end. Thank you all for joining. Appreciate you. And we're a little early, so any questions or comments or complaints or concerns, by all means, speak now or forever hold your peace.
What's your name? I missed the beginning.
Sally Levin.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. I think you said your name was Meira.
Dossie.
Dossie Mary. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Rabbi, thank you very much.
You're welcome. My
I'll give
pleasure.
Ari a good report.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you all for joining. And again, like I said, if no questions or comments.
Rabbi,
Yes.
Rabbi,
Yes.
first of all, forgive me for getting one late. But anyway, wasn't there something that Sarai knew where the bones were buried?
Who?
Thought her name was Sarai.
Oh, I think you're referring to Serach,
Yes,
the daughter of Asher.
thank
She
you.
was one of the few or only people that lived from the people that came into Egypt. That is another version. But did she know exactly where, or did she know that the bones were thrown into the river?
I have
So
no clue.
it could be that it was that, or it could be she knew the general area. But when Moshe came to the Nile, he couldn't see where it was, and they didn't have scuba gear back then, so they couldn't just go diving and find it there.
Another detail.
Another detail. There you go. That's it.
Another some say.
I'm sorry?
One thing well, as I'm learning, I realize that no matter what some say, there's always some rabbi,
Oh,
another some
absolutely.
say. There's a lot of
Always.
some say.
There's always some say.
I love
Always.
it.
Dasi, you wanted to say something? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's so important to bury Yosef in Israel, but a lot of Bnei Israel died like in the time they were in the desert. Did they bury
All of them died in the desert.
Oh, right. So were they buried in the desert or?
Yes. So the way it worked was in the desert, after the decree of that the Jews will die in the desert, every Tisha B'Av, the people that reached the age of 60 would dig their own graves and they would go to sleep in the grave at night and they wouldn't wake up in the morning. And that's why the 15th day of Av is a holiday. The first big event that happened was the Jews that, because that was the tradition for 40 years, that's what they were doing. And they went into the graves and nothing happened. They woke up the next morning. So they went in the next night and the next night. And finally, when it reached the 15th, they knew for sure that it was the 15th day of the month. There wasn't a miscalculation of dates. And they celebrated the fact that the dying stopped. But all the other Jews were buried in the desert. Just to further that point, one of the explanations why Moshe did not go into the land of Israel, what he was asking God to go into the land of Israel, when it says in the Eschanan, in Parshas Eschanan, it says he begged God to take into the land of Israel. He wasn't just begging God to take himself into the land of Israel. He wanted all his people that he brought out of Egypt with him. And he said, if I can't bring them in, I'm going to stay here. I'm not going in. It wasn't a personal request, excuse me, that Moshe was trying to accomplish. He wanted only if everybody else can come in. And if not everybody else, I'm staying here with my people. And we'll go in together when Mashiach comes. So yeah, they were all there. But Yosef and all the other tribes were all brought to Israel and buried in Israel. I think we know some of them where they're buried. Besides Yosef, of course, we know, but there are a few others. I know Binyamin, I'm pretty sure we know where his burial place is. And there may be a few others, I don't know for sure, but they were buried in other places.
So after they made all these specific special pieces, in like Exodus 40, it doesn't say Moses put the entire tabernacle together himself.
He did.
It's crazy.
The first time. I mean, well, actually, for the first 7 days. He constructed and deconstructed the Mishkan for 7 days in a row. And then after that, it was not him anymore. After that, every time they came to a new spot, the Levites would put it together when they arrived.
It's interesting that he was, because, you know, I mean, if it's you know, let's say a craftsman makes, I don't know, you get a crafted car, you know, a very expensive car, right? The average guy isn't going to be able to put it together. So it's interesting that they mention, you know, certain people having this and that skill, but for Moses to be able to put it together, that would mean that he also would have.
Well, he didn't build it. It was assembly. Moshe was assembly.
You know, like it's
actually it is a little bit, meaning it was not that complicated to put together. It was hard physically because there were massive wooden beams and a lot of them that needed to be stood up into these silver casings and then beams and bars put through them. So it was hard physically to do, but it wasn't to put it together. But it wasn't complicated. The actual building was not complicated. The crafting of the different materials, that was difficult. That was complicated because there was
just reading it makes it seem like
but the reading is more talking about, again, the building of the actual things. The building of the actual things was complicated. They were again, it was crafts, it was carpentry, and it had to be perfectly aligned carpentry, so that the wood had to stand close together. Working with metals, I mean, it's not
the embroidery of the
right of the different the curtains and that, and there was and also the weaving. They would weave in gold, so they had to cut gold very thin and then pound it down into threads, and they would be woven into certain parts of the fabrics. So there was actual gold, I don't know, gold laced fabric. I don't know if that's called that, gold laced, but yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining. And I'm sure Rabbi Ari will be here next week. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a great week. Bye-bye.